devices. So funny. This is where we are. The Aquarian full moon, full on, just surrounded by Apple products. Hello and welcome, everybody. Welcome to This Week in Space. Hi, Lily. Um, this is my weekly offering to the universe and to all y'all out there in TV land, where I talk about the astro weather of the week. And whew, we've got quite a week. Today is the Aquarius full moon, which will be, we are in the last little bits of the waxing phase. I believe the full moon is exact at 12:35 Mountain Time, which is in the Mountain Time zone, making that, I don't know, whatever that is for you. But this program will run until about noon, and so half an hour after that, we will be exactly full, and then just like the top of the in-breath, right? Can't get any more oxygen in your lungs, and then we begin to slowly exhale over the next 2 weeks to the new moon and that new seeding point where we begin to breathe in again. Whew, starting to get lightheaded, but what a great way to start off this week's show. Before we jump into the astrology, I just want to let y'all know a little something about something. I do this through AstroStar. AstroStar Live is an excellent astrology app where there are real live astrologers like me, even though sometimes I doubt whether I'm real or not. But there are other real live astrologers doing really good astrological work, like Richard Winooski, Bear Hickman, Sam Reynolds is on there, Cameron Allen, bunch of great people doing top-notch astrological stuff, giving talks, teaching classes, answering questions, giving readings. And I do this, weekly astro weather forecast through AstroStar Live. And if you're interested, check us out on AstroStar Live. It's a free download. I also put this out on Instagram and YouTube, get it out to the people to let you know what's going on in space. Another thing that I do for the people to get the info out there is the Melee Report, which is my weekly or sometimes bi-weekly astro weather forecast radio show. Astrology themed radio show which is much like this talk, except for instead of me talking the entire time, I play really excellent music that personifies the energy of the transits as I see it, and it is an eclectic mix, which always keeps you guessing and hopefully will keep you moving through the transits of the week. And one of the ways that I think about it is it helps to develop an embodied practice of astrology, so we can think about how the transits feel, how they sound, how we would like to move along with them, and so we can dance through the astrology of the week. So check that out. It's the Melee Report. You can find it on SoundCloud under Camp Wizard Camp, and I put a link in my stories on Instagram today. I got that one out real late yesterday, and I'll put a link in the show notes on YouTube. Let me just check this. Oh, thank you so much. Lauren is just saying that they appreciate my storytelling and that my astrology is unmatched. Thank you. I try and bring a good astrology jazz to the party. Keep everybody grooving through the week. All right. Let's kick it off. Let's talk about the space weather as it's showing up this week. We're talking about August the 19th through the 25th, and it is full on all the way across the sky. You know what I'm saying? Today we have a full moon in the fixed air sign of Aquarius, meaning the sun is in the fixed fire sign of Leo. Right, so that's an opposition, and a full moon is always an opposition. It is the light of the sun shining on the moon from across the zodiac that gives it that nice full-bodied flavor. This is also being, there's so much to talk about. Yesterday, on August the 18th, we had the Mercury Cazimi, which is Mercury's conjunction with the sun, which, kind of can bring some clarity to the retrograde process that happens about the middle of the retrograde. And so we're halfway there. You're almost there, folks. Right, almost to being able to spend money and sign contracts again, and participate in normal capitalist systems. Anywho, yeah, yesterday we had the Mercury conjunction. During this lunation, we have Uranus squaring the sun and moon, which is exact today. This is pretty partile, meaning like exact square. The moon is at 27 degrees and 15 minutes of Aquarius. Sun is at 27 degrees and 15 minutes of Leo, and Uranus is at 27 degrees and 11 minutes of Taurus. So the sun will perfect their square with Uranus right before that opposition to the moon perfects, but like pretty tightly packed in there, a lot of tension bubbling up. Before I go any further, I just forgot to mention one thing. Also, if you want some more info on the Aquarius Full Moon, I was a guest on the Inspired Astrology podcast, which is done by the brilliant astrologer Bear Hickman, who's also on Astrostar Live, and I got to be a guest on that, and we talked at length about the astrology of this full moon. So you can check that out if you're not sick of me yet. Or if you need more info, it's out there. The truth is out there, my friends. So so we have this fixed square between moon and sun and Mercury in opposition. Mercury conjunct the sun, opposing the moon, squared by Uranus, all of this in fixed signs. So this fixed energy and all of this tension. Then the other thing that we have going on in this full moon is a mutable T-square, where we have Mars and Jupiter conjunct in Gemini, squaring Venus in Virgo, who is opposing Saturn in Pisces. So again, other like tense aspect, right? So we have all this tension going on in space, and this full moon kind of like bringing it to the surface, kind of illuminating all of this tension. And when there is tense situations, something needs to shift. And so I think that one of the vibes of this week, right, is to be able to sit with the tension until that shift happens, right? And sometimes we need to make moves in order to help it along. But instead of kind of getting bored or feeling like I can't sit in this discomfort anymore, I need to do something, and so I'm going to react to it. How do we sit with it just a little bit longer than that? How do we sit through that discomfort until that internal knowing kind of arises and helps illuminate what the next right thing is, right? And we don't need to know the outcomes. We just need to know what the next right thing is. And sometimes that tension might break on its own and provide an opening for us to take steps in. And sometimes it might be us making a change, making a choice, and altering things, but we don't want to do that out of a place of reaction because we're bored or we don't know what else to do. Because that doesn't tend to be a very strong place to act from, right? A more skillful place to act from is a place where we can sit with what is arising until we get some clarity, and then make choices based on that, either things in the external situation shifting or something from the internal situation arising and helping us know this is the next right thing to do. And so I just wanted to put that out there. There was a couple more themes, I think, of like maintaining versus letting go, right? Or like trying to hold on to what we got versus, allowing something new to come in, or this like idealized perfection versus what is. And I think these are also parts of the tension. And again, we'll start with the kind of Uranus square to this full moon. So Uranus is upheaval and change and revolutionary energy, and fixed signs, and Uranus is in the fixed sign of Taurus, and the moon is in the fixed sign of Aquarius, and the sun and Mercury are in the fixed sign of Leo. So we have all this fixed energy, right? Fixed signs are about maintaining and sustaining, right? They are holding on to what they got, and they're like, this is what I got, this is working, I am just doing this. right? And their vibe is to keep that energy going. And one of the things that we can think about is like, if it's working, do more of that, right? And that is maybe like the mantra of the fixed sign is like, this is good, I'm good, this is working, this is what we do, like problem solved, case closed forever. Unfortunately, the world doesn't really work like that, right? Because we are in a shifting world where solutions and strategies that might have worked last year or last month or 10 years ago might not work in the same way now, right? And we can see like things that used to work before the internet are not going to work after the advent of the internet, right? Things that worked in your teens are maybe not going to work in your 20s or in your 40s, right? So the survival strategies that we have developed to keep ourselves safe, to keep things functioning, to keep the world working in a healthy way for us, those need to adapt, right? Because we are evolving and growing as a species, as a culture, right? And also as individuals in relationship with ourselves and each other and nature, right? So we have this kind of inherent tension already in Uranus in the fixed sign of Taurus, which Taurus is like, nope, these are the nice things that I like, and I'm going to keep them. Right? We're good here. And Uranus, this revolutionary energy, right, bringing this sort of radical vibe to the party, right? Is really like working on disrupting existing systems. And I think the ideal of that is to liberate stuck energy, right? So if we're like, this is what I do, this is how I survive, this is how I make it through, this is my strategy, this is what I always do, and I'm holding on to it, like energy gets stuck in that story, energy gets stuck in that system. And Uranus comes in and like flips the table, right? And the fixed signs are like, no, right? It's good, we're good, you can go now. You're at the wrong party, bro. But Uranus not trying to hear that, right? And I think that stuck energy in our, political system, right? Social network, in our physical body, in our mental system, right? Our psychological system, right? That energy wants to move, right? Everything kind of wants to be in flow. And when we find survival strategies that are like, nah, this is just what I do, I hold on to this, then that energy becomes kind of blocked, right? Or that energy doesn't have a way of flowing. And we can think about, again, like survival strategies that worked in our teens or 20s, right? Like drinking or drugs to fit in, or, dating this type of person or dating that type of person or doing this type of work to pay the rent, right? Those things might not be appropriate 10 years later or 5 years later or even next year. Right. And that fixed sign can be like, nah, holding on to this because if I let it go, I don't know what's going to come next. Right. Um, like, I don't know if it will be good. I don't know if it'll be okay. I don't know if it will be safe. Right. So there can be this desire to hold on to what we got out of the fear that what can come next will not be as good and probably will be worse. And I think that this comes from the inherent negativity bias that we have as human beings. Right. As human beings, we have evolved with a negativity bias to keep us alive. This is a survival strategy that developed when we were hunter-gatherer beings, right? Wandering around, seeing things that created danger and might kill us, that we had to make split-second decisions about to keep us alive. So an example of this would be like if there was a water hole, right? And you went to the water hole, you had a great time like 30 times in a row, and then one time you went there and there was a tiger, right? And you're like, oh my God, I might die. I am never going back to that watering hole because a tiger is there, right? You forget about the 30 times that it was okay, that you had a good time, that you were playing with your friends, everything was groovy. All you remember is like, there's a tiger there and I might die, right? And that helps us to stay alive. However, we are in a different sort of place societally and psychically these days, right? Where if we see danger, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's it and that's the end, right? But human beings and human society has evolved much quicker than our internal biological systems and our brain structure. So when we see danger, we're like, oh, hell no, right? Or if we let go of what we got, there is the fear based on our negativity bias that it won't be as good and that we are going to lose something, right? And that we are going to have more struggle, more problems, more issues. What we don't take into account a lot of the times is that it might be better, right? And like it seems logical, but when you're like, oh, I'm going to quit my job because I don't like this job, instead of being like, I'm probably going to get a better job and my life is going to get better. I'm going to have more money, better relationships and live in a bigger house and like things will be groovy. It's more like if I quit my job, I might starve to death and die. At least that's like what happens in me. Right. I don't know about y'all, but when I'm like, oh, I'm losing stability, like I could probably just die. And I think that this is also reinforced by societal structures. And, I think it's like we cannot separate ourselves from the systems that we live in. However, just on a purely like psychological basis, that story that if I don't have this thing that keeps me safe, I'm probably going to die, right? Or it's going to get worse keeps us in this small place, right? Keeps us holding on to what we have, even though we might have outgrown it, right? And I think that's some of the stuck energy of that we're dealing with. That Uranus is like, nah, get out of here, run. It could be better. It could be much better. Hold on, I took all these like great notes this morning, and I think I've sort of missed them. Give me one second, because I had all these like really good things that I wanted to say. Okay. So yeah, and I think that sometimes we don't allow ourselves to hold the potential that what comes next might be better than what we have, right? And I think that again is that stuck energy, that survival energy that tells us that what we have is as good as it's possibly going to get, and if we let it go, then it's going to be worse. And so, what happens if we were able to hold it could be better, right? It could be different. What happens if we allow ourselves to sort of flow with it and to imagine something bigger and brighter and better than what we have today? And, I think that this sort of idea gets reinforced through some other things that are happening during this full moon. Right. And I think one of the sort of issues that we run into is that whatever we can imagine in our human brains, right, in our limited human brains, they are finite. We can imagine great things, but they are also finite, right, is nothing compared to what the universe has to offer. This into in intimate and infinite, multifaceted dimension that we live in, right, is much vaster than what we can imagine from our human perspective, right? And my human perspective says, if I let go of this, then things are going to be worse. The universe says, what you're holding on to is nothing, and there is greater possibility and potential in the future as if you can just shift your gaze from attachment to openness, to curiosity, to wonder, you know. And I think that there is a quality of faith that this requires, which says tomorrow can be better than today, right? Or there is possibility out there. And I think part of the trap of the external pressures and also internal pressure says that like tomorrow can't be better than today, right? Or I don't know what tomorrow brings, so that is scary. And that's true, right? But what if we shift that a little bit and allow some hope and allow some faith? And I think that these are some qualities that we find in the archetype of Jupiter, who we'll be talking about a little later, right? Jupiter is the planet of faith and hope, right? But also we can think about what is our relationship to faith, right? And I'm not talking about like faith in a like deity or divinity or a god, although that might be, part of it, right? But what can we have faith in? What can we trust, right? Where do we find that optimistic sense that like it can be okay in our lives, right? Or in ourselves? And where do you find that in your biography, right? Where are times that you were like, I don't know if this is going to be okay if I make this leap, and then you did it and it worked out okay, right? Maybe there was like a shift or a backslide, but you got to where you are now, right? And I think it's really important that we are able to conjure those memories and sit in them for a little while, because one of the ways that we counteract the negativity bias, right, is by being able to sit with what's working, to sit with what's good, to sit in the memory of, I took that risk, it was scary, and it worked out, right? Because part of that negativity bias, and what is his name? Yeah, I think Daniel Siegel, I believe, said this, that our brains are like Teflon for good experiences and Velcro for bad experiences, right? So like if we have a good experience, like I'm saying, it's just like, whoo, whatever, like of course I took that leap and it was fine, right? But then we have a bad experience, like, oh my God, I broke a shoelace, like it's the end of the world. Right? I am such a terrible person. And that gets imprinted. So, what we need to do to kind of counteract that negativity bias is be able to sit in what's working, to sit in what's good, to sit in what worked in the past, and to really like soak that in. And I think it's like 30 seconds, right? You want to sit in a good memory for 30 seconds, and you sort of want to like, I think about it as like pressing it into me, into my blood, into my muscles, into my skin, into my bones, into my cells, right? We are like updating our cells with good memory, right? And that takes 30 seconds because we're running a very old operating system. That's like bad thing, cool, in there, right? In long-term storage. Right, good thing, whatever. Right? We don't have the processing capacity. Next, where's the bad thing? Scanning for evil, right? And so again, what we want to do is think about when it worked, how it worked, and really sit in that memory for 30 seconds and like press it into us and update ourselves, right? And so another thing that you can think about is like, how did you do it, right? What worked back then? What helped to support you to go through a big change, right? And I think of some of the big changes that I've gone through, and it was like just trusting my intuition was a resource that I used, being like, oh, you should go to this thing, right, that I didn't really want to go to, and then I met somebody on the bus who offered me a job, right? Or you should look at Craigslist, even though I wasn't looking at an apartment, and I found an apartment that like helped me to level up in some ways, right? Sometimes it's other people, right? But thinking about what resources or like what things helped you to make big changes in your life, right? Or to do the scary thing. And you can also think about what resources or strategies can help you to navigate change now, right? As we're going through all of this space tension, right? And we might be asked to let go of some things that we've been holding on to, even though they felt safe and they felt right for a time. I think there is what is really being called up during this full moon is like stuck energy wants to move, right? And so instead of like overturning things or flipping the table, which is like what Uranus is famously good at, right? How do we help this process along in not a destabilizing way, but usher it in through finding resource, right? Finding support, being able to tune into ourselves and tune into where that energy might be stuck, where we might be holding on to something that is not helpful anymore, right? And how that can change to be something that is more supportive, right? And one of the things that I've been thinking about is kind of like the energetic architecture of a person, right? And where in the architecture of our system, of ourself, of our psyche, that energy might be stuck, right? And part of what's going on with this full moon is the opposition of the sun in Leo and the moon in Aquarius. And Leo, what's up, Jeff? Nice to see you, my friend. Leo archetype is the self, right? This is me, this is my identity, this is my sovereign nation of me, right? Which is great. And then Aquarius across the zodiac is the people, the collective, right? And also this sort of ideal of it can be better, right? And then Leo hears that and is like, what? I'm not doing good enough, right? Look at me, right? And so it's this tension of how do we find belonging? How does the me that is me, right, shining bright, fit into the collective of people? What is my right place in the world? And I think something that happens, and this is just part of being human in my experience, is that we have to give up, or we are asked to, or we are put in situations where we feel we must give up parts of our authentic self to find belonging. We are relational beings that are in connection with each other, and this is part of how we survive and thrive, and this is something that we need, right, as human beings, to be okay, is to be in relationship with each other, right, to be liked and accepted and loved, and to find connection. And there's a story that we tell that I can't be me and have belonging, right? That's a thing that comes up for people, right? And so I must put away certain parts of myself, or hide certain parts of myself, or contort myself in different ways so that I can find belonging, which is sort of that lifeblood, right, of connection. And so I think when we sacrifice that authentic sense of self, right, that individuality, to find belonging so that we can stay alive, I think that creates stuck places in the architecture of our system. And Uranus again comes in and is like, this energy's got to move. Right, something's got to shift so that this energy can move, because like everything is being funneled in this way. It's sort of like if you think about the architecture of a house, right, and you have like a dresser right by the door, you have to walk around it, right? And so like you walk around and you walk around, and like space maybe like narrows because you get more stuff, right? And so like now you're sort of like twisting and turning through your kind of internal system, right? And Uranus is like, right? We have like given away too much of our real estate so that we can belong, so that we can fit in, so that we can feel okay, so that we can feel safe. And something has to shift, right? And so I think that this is this opportunity for revelation and revolution to come into the system and shift around some of that architecture a little bit, shift around the way that the energy moves through the system, and find liberation from that double bind that says, I need to be me, but if I'm me, then I don't belong and I could die. Right. And so how do we shift that? How do we take a different perspective? How do we allow ourselves to be us, right? And to be authentic and to be true to ourselves and our nature, and to find belonging in that with ourselves and in the larger world? And again, I think that's one of the questions that comes in, right? And I think that the gift of Aquarius also is as the outsider, as an observational force, right? The Aquarian archetype was the water bearer, and the water bearers were traditionally people who would leave the city to go and gather water, whereas like most other people didn't really leave the city. So everybody's always in the city, and the Aquarii, right, the water bearers would go outside. And if you go outside the city, you're like, oh, that's what it looks like, or that's the place that I live, or that's what it looks like when everybody's moving around. Isn't that weird, right? And if you ever have flown into a city, right, at night, and you see the sort of interchange of cars moving, these just streams of lights moving on the road, it's this beautiful tapestry of life that we get from that outside Aquarian view. Whereas, when we're up in it and we're driving around in traffic, it can be incredibly frustrating, and we lose that whole sense of, this is a beautiful tapestry of life, and all we can think about is like, these assholes are stopping me from getting where I want to go. Right. And, we can hold both things to be true, right? But I think that what we get with the Aquarian full moon is this opportunity to step outside of the normal structure, right? Outside of that energetic architecture of survival, right? That we may have found ourselves in, and to get a different perspective, right? And, and so with a different perspective, maybe we can shift how things move a little bit, or shift what we're holding, right? And this is not a from a place of judgment, right? Aquarius is great in the sense that it doesn't judge. It gets that perspective, and it's like, cool, that's how it is. It's not like, oh, that's bad, that's wrong, right? That's not like, Aquarius has this beautiful detached nature where it can just like step outside and observe, right? And a place of non-judgment. right? And I think that like place of true distance requires a level of detachment, right? And so, like, when we judge, right, or we come to conclusions, we get pulled back in, right? That's the difference of being like, oh, I'm observing this beautiful tapestry of traffic moving to being like, these assholes are in my way, right? It just pulls us right into that like felt experience. And I think Aquarius can maintain that detached observational stance, which can be very helpful, right? Until it's not, right? And that's the internal knowing of, okay, I've got to like come back in, right? I've got to come back in. I've gotten this perspective and I've seen how this system is maybe functioning, right? Under tension. And I've seen the places where like things might need to move, or I might need to like shift my relationship with change or the possibility or potential of change. And now like come back in and actually enact that, right? Um, so I'm going to take a break and for a moment and just read some of the comments that came in. Let you all take a breather. Oh, somebody was moving furniture. Right. Somebody says that they're moving furniture this morning, and so that was like pretty spot on. And I'm curious to feel like as the furniture is moved in the house, right, to notice the flow of energy, the flow of wind, right, the flow of movement through the house and how that changes. Also, how that changes interactions with people in the house, right? If we're all funneled into the kitchen and we're all kind of trapped in there, right? The sort of conversations that develop versus if there is an easy flow, ingress and outgress, right? And we can think about that as our internal system as well. And they were also saying water gathering is giving Octavia Butler's parable of the sower, right? Which actually I have. It's on my list of books to read. It's one of my favorites, and I sort of have some ideas. Love this book, right? And I can never remember, but I think that this might be a interesting, uh, you know, yeah, the sort of the prayer at the beginning of this is all that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change, which I think, yes. And, I think that this is very accurate for the tension that's happening, right, in this full moon, because we have these fixed signs that are like, I don't want to change. And it's like, yeah, but like everything that you touch, you change, and all that you change changes you. So we are already in a process of change just by being here. Yeah, Jeff is saying bibliomancy for the full moon. Exactly. And I've been thinking about this book in relationship to Neptune, the Neptune Saturn conjunction that'll happen in Aries. And I'm sort of like slowly thinking about a talk based around that and some other things. But I'm really glad that you brought that up in the chat, because I think that idea of our relationship to change is really on brand for this full moon, right? That stuck energy and the holding of the fixed signs, and also the T square that we are receiving in the mutable signs. And mutability is moving from that fixed, right, into, okay, like things are shifting now, right? Mutability links that fixed sustaining to cardinal initiating, right? So it's letting go of what was being held on to, what was being sustained, and moving into a place of letting go or decay, or that shift happening to prepare for the next kind of cardinal sign to initiate, right? And so the mutable signs occur at these sort of shoulder seasons, moving from summer into fall, and the sun is moving into Virgo later in the week. We'll touch on that if we have time. Right, which is initiating that mutable energy of Virgo, right? Which for us in the northern hemisphere is the beginning of the end of summer and the preparation for fall, which means also preparation for winter. harvesting, right? Choosing what gets harvested, preparing the harvest, and preparing to store food and energy for the winter when the system shifts. Right. And so we have this mutable energy that is, very much about shifting, or about, yeah, about shifting and about letting go and about welcoming change. And we also have all of this tension there, right? So how are we going to change? What are we going to change? What is worth keeping, right? What is worth throwing out? What needs to be adjusted, I think, is a lot of the questions that are getting asked by that mutable T-square, right? So we have one T-square that's like, I'm holding this and I don't want to give it up. And this other T-square that's like, things are changing all around me. How do I adapt to it? Right. And so we can kind of break this down because this is also happening on Monday, August the 19th, and we might just talk all day about things that are happening with this full moon. So we have this mutable T-square, which is composed of Venus in Virgo opposing Saturn retrograde in Pisces at 17 degrees and 30 minutes. And this is also being squared by Jupiter and Mars in Gemini. Right. So we can think about, let's just look at this piece by piece, which I think might be helpful because it's a lot. So we have Venus, which is our values, right? And Saturn is the pressures and conditions of external reality, right? So one of the things that's happening is this opposition between this is what I like, this is what I don't like, and then Saturn being like, well, yeah, I don't care. This is reality. You need to make money, right? And Venus is like, I don't want to make money, right? I want to play in nature. I want to have fun with my friends. I want to go swimming. I want to do nice things. I want to have nice clothes. I want to eat good food, right? I want to enjoy myself on this bountiful planet, on this spaceship Earth, right? We're here for a short time. We might as well like be here for a good time, right? And Saturn is like, that's not how it works. You must pay the landlord, right? You have to work hard, right? Life is about suffering, you know. You need to like do things that matter to get you money, right? And so this is this tension, right? Which might be playing out in the external world, might be playing out in our internal world, might be playing out in both of them simultaneously, right? And so with this opposition, we are considering how our values, what we love, how we love, who we love, are impacted by external conditions and the pressures of life, right? This also might be impacted by internalized stories of if I'm not working, I'm lazy. I have to do something to be okay, right? And one of the ways that we can think about this, and something that I've been trying to think about is, this fact that like we are, I don't know how to put this in a way that doesn't sound dumb, but like we are okay, right? We have everything that we need. We have an internal connection with the external world through the breath, that we are constantly participating in this relationship, internal world, external world, right? Every time you breathe in, you are taking in the out breath of the natural world, of the plant kingdom, of the vegetable world. Every in breath, right? It's like receiving the out breath of the plant world. And then each of our out breaths is a gift to the vegetable world, right? That is receiving our out breath and breathing it in. And we are in this sort of back and forth, constant connection and relationship with the natural world. And we forget that because it's just normal bullshit, right? And we're like, I need more gadgets, right, to be okay, right? There is the sense of like, it is not okay. I am not okay. I need something to make me okay, right? Where is the dopamine going to come from? Right? And I think the kind of Venusian relationship to the self, right, to the natural world, to the pleasure of simplicity has been supplanted by a sense of lack, a sense of vacancy, and a need to fill that with external objects, right? Objects of desire and also dopamine. As I say this, there's a car alarm going off outside. I hope that doesn't disturb anybody. um, as we like find ourselves, right, in this kind of pressure of Saturn being like, you need to do something, right? This helps ideally to strengthen our Venusian values and our relationships, right? And so we can think about also how are the conditions that we find ourselves in with our responsibilities and our duties, right, in opposition to our value system, right? How is responsibility in opposition to value, right? And if this is the case, what might need to shift, right? Or what do we need to do to be able to sit with this? Because ideally, right, the gift of Saturn, and Saturn has many gifts, is the pressure that Saturn provides helps us to get to that authentic self, right? So the external pressure of a job, right, might help Venus to really identify what their value system is. And if this job is in line or not in line with that value system, and if it's not, what might need to shift, right? Does one's relationship to work need to shift? Does the job one is doing need to shift? What can shift so that, you know, we can be in alignment with our values and the responsibilities that the world is asking of us? Because we can't just like lay around and do nothing all day, right? We live in a world, like, if there was no capitalism, if there was no, like, if the structure was different, we would still have responsibility to ourselves, to each other, and to the world, right? So we're not going to escape Saturn, right? Saturn is the limit of the world that we are living in. Only in death do we escape Saturn, right? We got to like work with it. And how do we get our value system in line with what Saturn is asking, right? And I think what Saturn is asking is the long term, right? Saturn wants to build sustainable things for long term, right? And it is through our Venusian values that we have choice and agency in what is getting built and how that is looking, ideally, right? We're not always in that position of privilege to have choice, right? But ideally, the things that we are building over the long term are helping to support our value system. And that's why it's really important to have a good relationship with Venus and a good relationship with our value system, so we can know, okay, this is the work that I'm doing to support my values, right? So in the long term, right, I am having more pleasure, more joy, more Venusian experiences, right? And so, you know, I think that Saturn, right, which is like discipline and responsibility, you know, um, that is an interesting question, Jeff. I'm going to leave that for a second, because I have a lot of stuff to get through. But, you know, I think, okay, Jeff is asking the thoughts on Aquarius rulership, Saturn versus Uranus. I'm studying traditional astrology right now with Austin Coppock, so I have sort of forced myself into accepting the traditional rulers, which I think is valuable. And I think that Saturn as the ruler of Aquarius like makes a lot of sense. I think that, you know, a case could be made for either of them. But the relationship between Saturn and Aquarius, I think, is interesting because Saturn is the limit and Uranus is like everything beyond the limit, right? Everything beyond the Saturnian structure. So this is the idealized vision that helps to also shape the reality that we are forming. Right. And I think Venus is also a very important part of this because Venus, again, is like what we like, you know, and so what we are getting faced with here is like, how do I get more of what I like? What do I have to do to create a world where I can have more of what I like? You know, and this is not going to come easily. This is going to take the Saturnian work of discipline and dedication, right? And also maybe some delayed gratification, right? And I think just to sort of round this out, right? We can think about like what is like Venus is in Virgo, so this is like striving for an idealized perfection, right? And so what is the kind of perfection that we're striving for versus the reality that we're living in? And where do those things like butt heads, right? And what might need to shift in that? Maybe it's like an idealized vision, right? Of this is the perfect relationship. And if I don't find the perfect person who checks all these boxes, then there's no one out there for me. right? And Saturn's like, well, that person doesn't exist. What are you going to do about that now, right? Are you just going to be alone, right? And then that can bring up some Saturnian feelings of, oh, I'm so alone, right? Saturn is sort of a solitary curmudgeon, right? Oh my God, like no one loves me, right? Meanwhile, like holding like really high standards that no one could ever live up to, right? And so, like, how do we kind of adjust our kind of idealized vision of perfection to the reality of the situation? Also, how do we, start thinking about the long game and again, what we are building? And I think that, Saturn says that we construct our reality through dedication and action over time. And Venus says, okay, cool, make it beautiful, right? And so, how do we, and this is one of the ways that I've thought about, like, how do we reconcile this opposition, right? Because if Saturn's like, you got to go to work every day, right? Because that's just the position that you're in. It's like, okay, cool. That is the reality. That is the reality of the conditions that I'm living within right now. So how do I make that beautiful? Right? How do I make this enjoyable? How do I come into a relationship with that is in alignment with my values that makes me feel good? Right. And so we can think about how do we transform the things that we have to do, the routines of life into rituals and acts of devotion for the Venusian archetype, right? For the planet and the archetype of beauty and love and values, right? We can also think about how do we turn these, our rituals of everyday life into acts of devotion for the future that we are cultivating, or our future self who is already living how we want to live, right? And to think about, instead of being like, oh, I have to get up for work every day, which maybe you do, right? How do we say, okay, I am getting up for work today because, this is my offering to my future self, right? Or this is the part of the ritual of the beauty that I am weaving into my life, right? Oh, their mama says Saturn delays but never denies. Yeah, right. And I think it's also like, how do we shift our relationship with this, right? From I have to I get to. And if I get to, how do I make it my way? How do I do it my way? How do I make this beautiful? How do I come into a beautiful relationship with this instead of just feeling like, it's a struggle and a slog? And, we can't necessarily always be there, but I think that's an important thing to hold, right? Okay, so also Monday. um, and this might actually round us out for today. So also today we have Jupiter in Gemini squaring Saturn retrograde in Pisces. This is happening at 17 degrees and 27 minutes. And so this is also squaring the Venus Saturn opposition, right? And this Jupiter is also conjunct Mars, right? So adding like extra oomph and energy into this tension, right? So the this is the opening square from the Jupiter Saturn conjunction, which occurred in December of 2020. Right. And so Jupiter and Saturn have a 20-year synodic cycle, meaning that they form a conjunction every 20 years. Right. And so this is the opening square from that kind of conjunction point. Right. And then also this Jupiter Saturn relationship, their synodic cycle has shifted from occurring in Earth signs, where it occurred for the past 200 years, and December 21st, 2020 is the shift of triplicity of these conjunctions into air signs. So for the next 200 years, approximately, Jupiter and Saturn will be conjunct in air signs, which creates a kind of shift, right, in how we do things over the next 200 years. And so again, this is the opening square of that, from that conjunction. And the opening square is a kind of like tension point where it's like, okay, something got set in motion. How is that going? What needs to shift? Is this in alignment with what I wanted? Is this like where I want to go? Is this the track that I want to be on? Right? What might need to be course corrected? What might need to be discarded? Right? Because we're talking mutable signs, right? What might need to be discarded here, so that we can be more in alignment, right? And move into the next phase of this journey. Now, this square happening today, August the 19th, is the first in a series of 3 squares that they will be, Jupiter and Saturn will be engaged in it. The second one happens at 14 degrees Gemini and 14 degrees of Pisces on December 24th. So Merry Christmas, y'all. And so also something to think about is what is happening now, what is arising now will be revisited during the Christmas holiday and solstice, right? Leading up to New Year. So to just maybe like make some mental notes, what is arising, what tensions are you noticing, what is shifting in the system that, you know, and then seeing what kind of gets brought back up in December of 24, around Christmas time. The third and final square is going to happen on June 15th of 2025. Jupiter will be at 1 degree of Cancer and Saturn will be at 1 degree of Aries. So this will shift from the mutable signs, right, into cardinal. And I think that's important because cardinal initiates, right? So this is the kind of like things need to be adjusted, things need to be let go of, things are shifting, right? And how do we bring that into a better alignment to be like, okay, cool, this is the thing that we're doing now, right? This is the tension that is sort of, you know, asking for resolution, and that resolution kind of sets the course for the next chapter in this, you know, relationship between Jupiter and Saturn. And Jupiter, again, the planet of expansion, hope, faith, right? Saturn, the planet of restriction, constriction, reality, right? It is the reality principle, right? And we can think about Jupiter maybe as our beliefs, right? What we put our faith in. Jupiter can be the ideas that we are striving for and what we want our life to be like, right? And Saturn shows us the result of our actions and the consequences of our choices. Saturn is the reality principle, which is the place where reality meets life and our intentions, right? So we have this intention, oh, I want to do this big thing. And Saturn's like, okay, what are you going to do about it, right? You know, that's going to cost money. How are you going to get that money, right? That's going to take time, right? Where, like, how are you going to carve out that time, right? How are you going to show up every day to like make this thing a reality, right? So you can also think about what got set in motion back in December of 2020 and around that time, right? And like how that shift, you know, what like we are at this sort of observational point of being like, cool, I did that, or I'm in the midst of that, and how is that, you know, what might need to change, right? What lived up to my expectations and what kind of pushback did I get from reality that is forcing me to kind of reassess or reevaluate, right? And this might be like, that's actually not the thing for me, right? Or that might be like, okay, like I need to double down or I need to work harder, right? What are the results that we are getting from our actions? And how is that in alignment with our belief system, right? And so, you know, we also have this relationship in, I'm going to try and get through this really quickly. We also have this relationship of Saturn and Jupiter in a like Jungian psychological sense as the puer aeternus, or the eternal youth, which could be Jupiter, right? And the senex, which is Saturn, the old person, right? The curmudgeon. And this is the relationship between the youth that is like, I can do anything that I want, right? And the old person, or the you know, who's like a buzzkill, who's like, that's never going to work, right? And this is the relationship with them. We can think about this as the you know, Captain Hook versus Peter Pan. Captain Hook is sort of the senex who is obsessed with form, right? Who wants to prevent Pan from doing whatever he wants. And Peter Pan, who is the eternal youth who flies, right? Who doesn't even have a shadow, needs to have his shadow sewed onto him, right? And that relationship. And if we are too Pan, if we are too puer, right, we never get anything done because it's just flitting from one thing to the next, right? We never grow up, right? And I think growing up, and it's funny that I'm saying this, right? Because when I was young, I was like, yeah, fuck growing up. I never want to grow up, right? And now that I'm a grown up, I'm like, oh yeah, I see the benefit of this, right? Because when we're young, we have all the energy and none of the wisdom. And when we're old, we have all the wisdom and none of the energy, right? And I think we grow into that nice alignment between energy and wisdom, right? And I think that is the right relationship of the Senex and the Puer, or the eternal youth and the elder, or the Saturn and the Jupiter, right? Is being in that right relationship. And right now we're in tension, right? There is the eternal youth that's like, I want to do whatever I want to do whenever I want to do it. And the Senex, who's like, there are consequences to that, and like that's gonna hurt my back, right? Or like, I actually like want to build something longer and lasting, right? So how do we get these energies? How do we get Captain Hook and Peter Pan to work in alignment with each other? Because they need each other, right? Without Pan, there is no Neverland, right? Without Hook, there is no tension for Pan to battle against, right? And that is that struggle that like keeps things going. That is that expansion and contraction of the Jupiter and Saturn relationship. Jupiter's like, I want to do whatever I want. And Saturn's like, okay, well, we have to make choices here. Time is finite, right? So what are you going to put your energy towards? So just a way of thinking about that. What is the right relationship of Pan and Hook, right? And I could go on at length about that. James Hillman does a lot of writing about it, and Marie-Louise von Franz, who's a Jungian analyst, also has a book about it. And I guess like one of the last things to think about is Marie-Louise von Franz is like, the eternal youth needs to grow up. James Hillman is like, the the Senex needs to lighten up, right? So they both have their perspectives, but I think it's about finding that right relationship between responsibility and idea or desire, right? And how Saturn can form a channel or a structure for that energy of that eternal youth to flow through, right? So that it can be manifest in reality. Because the problem with the Senex, if there's too much, it crushes everything down to earth, and nothing can sort of breathe, right? Nothing really happens because there's too much pressure. The problem with too much of the puer is that like nothing ever comes to earth, right? Because its delicate hands get hurt if it like picks up and it's like, ow, I can't do it for me, or I don't want to, right? I just want to live in this like fantasy of the idea, right, and the vision. And so we need to come into that right relationship of how the vision meets the work of reality, right? And that's what we're getting asked to do here. So, and I don't want to leave it on this note, but I think it's really important to kind of bring in, because another component of this square, right, is about the consequences of Jupiter, right? So we have Jupiter in Gemini, which is the multiplicity and also fragmentation, right? Gemini is also lots of information and misinformation, which I don't know if you look at social media, but or the internet at all, but there's a lot of stuff out there that is just being accelerated with AI, right? And so Saturn is the resulting consequences of that misinformation, right? Or that wealth of information. And so an example of this, right, is like we can see the fascist attacks that were happening on POC people and Muslims and immigrants in England, I believe, last week when we had the Mars-Jupiter conjunction. And that those horrific attacks were really sort of bolstered by social media, right? And misinformation that was spread wildly on social media without any fact checking, right? And right-wing, fascist, white supremacist groups on social media kind of whipping everybody up into a frenzy, which resulted in, race riots and, targeting of people and violent action by, right-wing extremists, right? And so we have this kind of Jupiterian misinformation, right? A wealth of misinformation flying around, right? With Mars in the mix, so making people angry and being amplified by people like Elon Musk, right? Who, might be in being amplified by people like Elon Musk, right? And now Saturn is showing us the consequences of these actions, right? Which they result in like actual violence and harm to good people, right? And so one of the things that I think Saturn, right, the reality principle in the structures of how we exist is revealing is, you know, the fact that social media companies have drastically reduced their misinformation and safety staff, right? When Elon Musk took over Twitter, he like got rid of all the people who were fact checking. And during the riots in England, Elon Musk posted that something saying that civil war was inevitable, right? Which is accelerating the chaos, which is, like hasn't civil war was not inevitable, right? This dude is just trying to like, I don't know what he's trying to do, but it's just like pouring gas on a fire, right? And this person who is the owner of a social media company might some might say has a responsibility, right, to report factually and also to de-escalate tense situations instead of pouring gas all over them, right? Instead of like increasing danger and chaos, right? And so I'm bringing this in because there's an opinion piece in the Guardian yesterday by Carol Codwaller, called "Inciting Rioters in Britain Was a Test Run for Elon Musk. Just see what he plans for America." That's the title of the opinion piece. And basically, the piece argued that these events in England are kind of the canary in the coal mine for democracy, much like Brexit foretold Donald Trump's first election in the US. So this author posed the question that what happens if Elon Musk decides not to accept the results of the election and flood social media with misinformation, right? And this is maybe a dystopian fantasy, but one that doesn't seem like too far off. And again, I'm not trying to like scare anybody with this, but we're looking at these sort of like Jupiter and Gemini, like tons of misinformation, right, without Saturnian structure, right? Without the safeguards in place of like fact checking and misinformation teams, right, that sort of rein in social media, right? And a lot of these were put in place after January 6th, right? Because that was an event where like misinformation spread and it resulted in an attempted coup, right? And so a lot of social media companies put in place sort of disinformation groups, which have all been pretty much eroded. And so there is very little to stop misinformation and conspiracy theories from taking hold of a disaffected populace, right? And this, my friends, is why Saturn's important, right? If you've ever been like, I hate Saturn, right? Don't say that first off, because Saturn's awesome. And secondly, this is why Saturn is awesome, because Saturn is the limitation of unhinged conspiracy theories that infect the populace, right? Saturn puts on the brakes. It provides guardrails and limitations, right? And so what we're seeing right now is Jupiter's expansion of information in Gemini without Saturnian fact checking or Saturnian structures to get the Gemini train back on the tracks. And so I think this square is a key moment that shows where things are out of alignment and might need to be corrected in order to restore a healthy balance of expansion and contraction, right? Or that like Jupiterian like can talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and Saturn being like, okay, well, that crossed the line. Right, that's too much. That is actually not pro-social at this point, and that is perhaps going to lead to harm and hurt and chaos and disruption, right? And not in the fun disruption way, in the like really like not cool type of way. So I didn't want to leave on a bummer note, but I don't know, we're here now. And I think it's just an important thing to think about, right? What is our right relationship as a society and as an individual between the Jupiterian, I can do whatever I want, and the Saturnian actions have consequences, right? And ideally, how do we get these things in alignment so that the things that we want to do are producing a shared reality that we all want to live in, that we are willing to take responsibility for, and that we are willing to show up for, right? And how do we have our sort of Jupiterian ideals, right? And the things that we believe in, how are they in alignment with, the structure of reality and consensus reality, right? And I think consensus reality can shift, right? But, it is that relationship between like, hey, I want to do this, and reality being like, well, when you do that, it kind of hurts, right? Or this person was hurt by that. So maybe like we can shift that behavior a little bit. And I think that this is the important relationship between Saturn and Jupiter, that expansion and that contraction, which again, we always have access to in the breath, right? In the in breath, Jupiter, out breath, Saturn. And as we do that, we are in relationship. We are in Venusian relationship with the vegetable world, right? With the plant realm, right? We are breathing in their exhale, and they are breathing in our exhale. And, this maybe throughout the week can help to remind you that you are in the right place at the right time. And that is my wish for you, my friends. So thank you for tuning in to another week in space. I am your host with the most, Jonah Emerson Bell, also known as Blind Stallion Space Wizard on the Instagram. Yeah, I am an advisor for the AstroStar Live app. You can find me over there. I'm available for astrology readings through that app. I don't have a lot of time right now because I'm finishing up my graduate degree, but soon after that, I will have tons of time, God willing, right? As soon as the Saturnian pressure of my graduate degree lifts, I should have tons of Jupiterian time to be doing more readings, more talks, more classes, more of what I want to do, less of what I don't want to do. At least that's my hope. Oh, and funny story, I started my graduate program. I was doing my applications for graduate school during the Jupiter Saturn conjunction. So this, like, I'm seeing that kind of evolution and getting to a point where it's like, okay, now what? Or what needs to shift? Or what do I need to change? Or what do I need more of? And right now, maybe more Jupiter, less Saturn, but we will see. Anyway, you can find me on AstroStar Live. I'm up there, Jonah Emerson Bell. You can find me on Instagram, Blind Stallion Space Wizard. And you can find my weekly astrology-themed radio show on SoundCloud under Camp Wizard Camp. And check that out. This week's show is great. It came out yesterday. I put a link to it in my stories on Instagram. And so that is, if you don't want to listen to me talk for an hour, you can listen to me play music and talk for 2 hours or 2 hours plus. Thank you, Shayna. So that is all the astro weather that is fit to print, my friends. I will see you next week. Same wizard time, same wizard channel. And until then, be well. I wish you all a very happy and safe and expansive Aquarius full moon, the contraction in the right places, expansion in the right places, and a good observational view. And I wish you all well. And until next time, may the force be with you. Bye now.